he almost had to give me the hook because, it was like everybody was pretty engaged. So we kind of kept going.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. I am your host, Christopher Mader, and we are once again filming here on the fourth floor of the Liberty Clubhouse of the Osgood Bradley Building at 18 Grafton Street. And I want to welcome my guest, James Boudreau. He is author of the book, Exporting Prosperity and Why the U.S. Economy May Never Recover. And James, welcome. Thank you for coming on to the show, sir.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here.
Let's get right into it. One of the things I want to ask you first off is, tell us about you. Tell us about, I know you started some businesses before, and you've obviously had some problems. We'll cover that later with copyright and patent stuff. We'll cover that later. But tell us about James Boudreau. Tell us about how you got started and how you got started writing this book.
Well, I guess I've had a somewhat storied career. I did the traditional, more of a traditional career working for other companies in the video game industry for the first half of my
when it was infancy, right?
Yeah, back in the 80s and early 90s, and decided that I didn't want to live on airplanes to the extent that I was, and went back to grad school. Thought I would get an MBA and maybe go do some consulting while I finished that, and then get a real job when I graduated. And that was 96, and the real job continues to elude me. So I started doing a lot of...
You work for yourself, so technically you're not really, what's that saying? Once you start working for yourself, you find something you love, you're never really working anymore.
Yeah, it's a funny backdrop, and you're also always feeling guilty because you feel like you should be doing something. So if anything, I think you work more. But I ended up working in a lot of, as a consultant and sometimes even a full-time employee in a lot of startups since, including my own. And my company evolved into a collection of small e-commerce stores. So I get to really live a lot of what's going on in the economy as a small business owner, as a consultant in other clients that I still work with, and just seeing firsthand what it's like to try and keep your business going, what it's like to try and take care of people who work for you. And then watching the news, and it just never added up. Or not, for years it hasn't made sense to me. You hear, the economy's great, the stock market's great, unemployment's going down.
Your sales are off.
Yeah, well, it's not even necessarily our sales, but even if sales are up, they come so much harder.
Yeah, and the margins are smaller, right?
Price pressure.
Right.
It's just the feeling, the sense that you have when you go to work every day. As you said, when you own your own company, it's not the same as going to work for somebody, but you feel a certain tone and tenor in the business. You're moving, things are going on, they're happening, you're struggling. It's just you always have a sense in mind and body of how the business is doing because you live it. But at the same time, I saw countless friends over the last decade that were very successful people that were downsized, right-sized, outsourced, laid off, retired, you name it, that would have had a job in 2 weeks 15, 20 years ago, or had 3 or 4 offers to pick from, that in the last almost 10 years can't even get interviews.
Sure.
These Yeah, it's crazy. So how do you, it just didn't make sense to me. How can you possibly equate all of these people who are capable, educated, hardworking, by all measures successful in their jobs in previous years, not even get interviews for jobs either on their level or much lower even?
I actually covered this in an interview a few weeks ago. I interviewed a man named John Dumaine. He's actually running for president. He's out in California. And we actually covered this very specific issue. I had told him about my particular story. I didn't go to college. In fact, I'm a high school dropout. Everything I ever did myself. And I started my own contracting business. It wasn't a huge success. I didn't make millions of dollars, but I fed my family and I was able to get by. And as time went on, I realized there was more competition, and I eventually moved into other businesses. The point I'm trying to make is, in my situation, it's very tough for me to go out and get a job. I have like a 4 or 5 page resume. Here I put this radio show together. I did it all by myself. I built this whole thing by myself. And what I had said to John Dumaine is, seriously, somebody like me can't get a job? Somebody who can think outside the box, somebody who can create something like this, talk to somebody like you, interview somebody like you.
But has not only a depth of skills, for example, in carpentry, but breadth of skills.
Exactly.
And the perspective that comes with time.
And I've educated myself. My mother said to me years ago, she said, if you've got a love of reading and a love of learning, the rest is going to come to you. And the amount, when I do this show, like I said to Mr. Dumaine, when I do the show, the amount of research that I have to do, I read your book only 2 reasons. One, I wanted to read your book. I enjoyed reading your book. But I also had to read your book so that I knew what I was going to talk about when I came to talk to you on the show. And so what I've done is I've got guests a week ahead and 2 weeks ahead. I've got to read their material. I've got to research their material. Again, I'm a high school dropout, but yet I'm able to do all this stuff. But yet, for some reason, sorry, we can't fit you in. You don't have a college education. You don't have this certification. You don't have that certification. Seriously, I can't get a job. Somebody with my knowledge, my ability to get things done, I can't find a job.
Sure. Well, ironically, I don't have a bachelor's degree. So I got into the consumer technology products industry at 19 years old and got into the PC business very young and developed some very rare skills, and that is marketing and sales of that type of product, and it served me very well in my career. So
when I was contracting, I learned how to market, how to retail, how to sell, sit down with the customer and negotiate a contract.
Sure, and when I went to get an MBA, it was more to verify if I actually did know what I thought I knew and learn whatever else I didn't. So I agree with you. The school of not necessarily hard knocks, but the school of real world. And actually doing things will teach you a heck of a lot more. But it's amazing, and let's face it, anybody who has a tuft of gray hair, as you and I both do, knows it's age discrimination.
Yes.
And the HR people have come up with these beautiful series of lines to negate any potential liability. And I don't think you would fit in with the culture here. That's a good one.
Let's get into this here.
Sure.
One of the things I would like to open the show with this issue of patents, and I had mentioned a few minutes ago that you had your problems. But while he was Secretary of State, first Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, one of the things that he had to do was he was also in charge of the patent office. Yeah, and I'm reading DeMoss Malone's Thomas Jefferson, but again, getting back to I educate myself here.
Sure.
Jefferson didn't like this part of the job. He actually tried getting Congress to pass a bill to set up its own agency. Eventually, that did happen. And I want to read from yours here in your book. You even say, quote from the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. The Congress shall have power to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited time to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries again, you mentioned here patents. The protections afforded by a patent have always been intended to protect an inventor of some useful device, substance, process, etc., to allow that inventor to capitalize on their innovation. Over time, however, the patent system has become overburdened, if not corrupted, under its own weight. There's over 9 million patents since 1790. This is not only fact, but you also mentioned in your book. The system is completely backlogged. There's no protection while you're patented, and this is where I want to talk about what happened to you. There's no protection of your patent while it's being considered because the system is so backlogged. Companies, meanwhile, are ripping off our inventions. They're, what's the term I wanted to use?
Counterfeiting.
They're counterfeiting, and they're taking people's design. And you had mentioned in your book that even design, even a branding design, they change it just a little bit, and then they call it their own, even though it's your product or my product. So expand upon this and tell us about your particular situation, because I overheard your conversation at the Canal Bar about how you invent, I think it was a stylus of some sort.
Even simpler.
Yeah. Why don't you just take it from here? Go right ahead.
Sure. It was the classic story of a widget, and this widget is a little plastic pen holder. It's got one flat side designed to stick on a monitor or a piece of equipment, or touchscreen panel, and it has a wine glass shape, kind of graduated. It was designed to fit in well in a retail environment on upscale equipment, kiosks, health centers, things like that might need a stylus. And there were a couple of holders on the market, things you could use as a pen holder, but they didn't really have an elegance of design. And so I finally, in 2005, started designing and making my own. And it wasn't that this was the coolest thing in the universe, but it was something that I designed for a certain purpose, for a certain customer base. It was a product my own customers for one of my web businesses was seeking, which is something to hold a stylus. So I come up with this design. Well, fortunately, it turns out to be very successful, and companies start specifying this is the part that we'll use in this piece of equipment. And so I start to sell tens of thousands of these pen stylus holders every year. And it really gains a little tiny foothold in a little tiny market, but it was the reward for the creativity that went into designing it. Well, long story short, in 2009, big company X, and it's a $5 billion U.S. public company that makes the majority of its money selling its products and services to the U.S. government or to small businesses like mine, which is one of the real bizarre ironies in this whole case. Well, they came to me and said, well, our engineers, actually the first thing that happened was their engineers came to me and said, we need a stylus that has a tether on it and a means of holding it to use on a touch screen on one of the systems we're going to be launching. Would you help us come up with something? Absolutely. Spent several months trying different combinations so we come up with the ideal configuration. And all throughout this process, I was told, well, okay, we're going to be buying 15,000 to 18,000 units of this item, year after year, at least for 3 to 4 years, and plus replacements. So
basically had a contract going.
Verbal, yeah.
Right.
To me, that's a verbal contract.
Sure,
says,
right.
Here, go do this work because we're going to buy, we're going to buy this many. So we go through the process, and I'm told that our item is going to be the specified part in the bill of materials. That means the standard part that goes in this piece of equipment. Well, the trail goes quiet, as they say, till about late December, January of 2009, 2010. I get a call from the purchasing department, who then begins to tell me how they will do business, which is, you will front us this amount, you will get paid in 3 months, maybe, and we want this price. And I said, okay, I understand, but here's our payment terms. And by the way, during this process, I was asked, are you a qualified small company? And there's...
They asked you.
They asked me.
Right.
And a qualified small company...
Yeah, what does that mean?
The Small Business Administration actually has a set of definitions for what is actually considered a small business. Now, it's easy to think about a small and disadvantaged or small and minority business where it's either minority ownership, woman-owned, owned by the handicapped, or employs the handicapped. There are certain certain things where you gain certain advantages as a small company. But in our case, we more than qualified for the definition to be the definition of a small business under the federal guidelines. So we said yes to verify that. So again, now they know I'm a small company at this point. And to know a small company means you can't afford to lay out, untold amounts of cash and wait forever
Millions
to be
or
paid.
even a few $100,000 or a few thousand. You can't.
Especially when you have to pay suppliers in advance.
And your employees.
And to buy and make. Right, sure. So, anyways, I said, well, here's what we can do. Here's what we can't do. And okay, we'll get back to you. Don't hear anything for 3 months. And then all of a sudden on my website, I get an order from this company, or 2 different orders that added up to 5,000 units, paid by credit cards. I thought to myself, okay, well, we're in business. I guess they have kind of come around. And it took us, because we had no notice, took us a couple months to get everything shipped. And the whole order produced enough to order what we did. And as time goes on, again, just funny signals, so to speak, in the conversation.
Yeah, something didn't smell right.
So, in any case, it comes June, July. It should be about time when they're going to need another batch based on kind of the schedule and volume that they projected. So I started emailing the project manager saying, okay, it's, we're ready, if you need, we've brought in extra parts, we've done a few other things.
Yeah, you're ready to go.
Yeah, for the next batch. No answer. Then a month goes by, send it another one, no answer. And then it just didn't smell right. So I started doing a bunch of research, and lo and behold, I find a factory in China.
Oh, good God.
Has my stylus holder with a little different stylus for sale on their website.
Now stop there. Was it an American company that outsourced over to China, or was it a wholly owned Chinese company?
In this particular case, it was a wholly owned Chinese company.
Okay, cool.
But I started to do some research. So I emailed, I have kind of the good fortune to have the 2 most prominent websites that sell styluses, get a little category. But I sent an email over to the factory and explained that and said, well, if you're in the business, you certainly would want to sell your product through us. Can you give me a price? And send me a sample. He said, absolutely. So he FedExed me a sample, sent me a quote, and in doing a little more detective work, I said, well, do you have any distributors who sell it in the United States? And I said, we do. I said, because we may need some inventory. So he introduced me to a company in California that is essentially a professional offshoring company.
Holy crap.
So if you design a product here and you want to have it made for less overseas, you go to this company, give them your designs, and they will go get it for you. So I contact this company and say, do you have any of this item for sale? We need a quote. I said, well, we do sell that item, but we only sell it for one customer, and we just brought in 15,000 units for them. Funny coincidence on that number. But we can't sell it.
That was the number that the original contractor wanted from you.
Yes. Now,
Oh my God. You can't make this stuff up.
no. So, but we can't sell it to you direct because it's for one customer. I said, okay. Now, at this point, just this one piece I actually make in China myself. And we take that piece, we bring it here, and then we assemble it into other products. So, and that's just a reality of affordability. There are sometimes that to survive, you have to make some things, in China. But wherever possible, add value, create jobs here, trying to balance it. But in any case, but actually, it was such an exact copy that I thought my factory was selling my product out their back door. So they were using my molds that I own without my authorization. That's what I thought was going on. So I emailed the product manager who hadn't responded to me in 2 months, and just sent him a note and said, I understand if you've gone in a different direction and don't wish to buy our model, stylus, and holder any longer, but just so you know, if anybody is selling you that holder, it is our intellectual property, and they're doing so without our authorization. And within 30 minutes, I get a phone call from the company in California yelling at me for interfering with his customer.
Wow, this is getting really good. Keep going.
Oh, it got crazy. So, long story short, I had to do a lot of research, and they basically said to me, well, unless you have a patent, too bad, it's a competitive world.
Now, you do have a patent. Unfortunately, it's pending, right?
No, it's a situation where we have what is called trade dress. And
you cover it. Yeah, it's a design that you came up with. You even mentioned it in your book. It's like a Sharpie. Everyone knows what a Sharpie looks like. It has that specific design, that specific Sharpie logo on it.
Exactly.
Again, all you got to do is just change a few things here and there, and suddenly, boom, you have a different product.
Well, to a certain extent, yes. But for example, in the case of a Sharpie, there was a company that made an indelible marker, the exact same shape as the Sharpie marker, but to put a different name on it. And Sharpie, or Newell Rubbermaid, the company that owns it, went after them and won in federal court because people knew that was a Sharpie, and they were basically taking off on those rights. And it essentially comes down to product counterfeiting. And it has to do with, it's a cross between patents. There are design patents and there are functional patents. A design patent is one of the things we could have applied for when we created this device, but it's a small $1.29 item. And that's the ironic thing. This was done by this, big company X to save $3 on a piece of equipment that goes for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000.
Wow.
Okay, it was like for pennies they did this essentially. Pennies in their pockets, $5 billion company. So, but in the case of trade dress, see, a trademark is a logo. Like the Coca-Cola logo is very distinctive.
Right,
you know what it is. Exactly. That's a trademark. The design patent is for a certain, like a Sharpie would be eligible for design patent, and I'm sure they probably have one. Based on the economics, again, $10,000 to $20,000 to get a patent and years to wait, we opted not to. But over time, we built up enough awareness and presence in the market to, we believe, qualify for what is called trade dress protection.
At a certain point in time, somebody had said to me once a long time ago when I started writing and I started publishing my blog, that there's a certain amount of recognition and it's intellectual property, even though you don't necessarily have a piece of paper that says, yes, this is copyrighted material, or yes, this is patented material, because everybody knows that it's James' product or Christopher's product. Everybody knows, my blog, the Lexington Green, everybody knows that that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody else was to come along later on and use that name or plagiarize my material, that's a copyright infringement on mine because, again, it's name recognition.
Absolutely.
So that's what you're talking about. Everybody knew it was your product.
Oh, Oh, absolutely. And in the course of copying it, they made printouts from my website and sent it to the offshore company and said, make this.
Mm-hmm.
They bought samples from me and sent them. So, I mean, it's the obviousness that they made a copy of my product is blatant.
Is there a lawsuit? I mean, no details. You don't have to.
No, there's been a lawsuit in federal court.
How is it still going?
It is still ongoing. It is nearing conclusion.
How's it look? Can you tell?
Well, we have a hearing this week, and based on the outcome of that hearing, we may have a trial sometime in the next several months.
Good luck. Good luck.
But
the
thing is,
it happens all the time.
Absolutely.
It's not just you. I mean, Brad here, the guy who owns this building, the guy who lets us sit in here, his father owns, they make those big diamond cutting blades for concrete or industrial stuff, and I'm sure he's run into that. I mean, a diamond cutting blade, everybody knows how they're designed. But even Brad's company probably has some secret. There's just the way they cut the diamond a certain way, or the way they temper their steel a certain way, and that makes their product intrinsic to their company. That I wouldn't even doubt it that he's probably got that locked away in his safe, and he's probably got to be very careful about that, because there's a million companies out there making diamond cutting blades, and there's a million companies in China trying to undercut us.
Absolutely.
Now, this is what you cover in your book, is that this is a huge problem in the United States. It's intellectual theft, property theft, knockoffs.
Counterfeiting.
Sure.
If you look at the estimates, and I haven't seen any specific numbers, but they're in the billions of dollars that fashion companies, Gucci, Yves Saint Laurent, Chanel.
And they're not necessarily American companies, they're European companies, the European designers.
This is a worldwide issue.
Yeah.
And the problem is not that there aren't laws to protect it. It's not that they're not even enforceable. It's just that unless you can afford to go after it, their assumption, the opposition in my particular case, thought there's no way he can tough it out.
Right.
And
well,
their attitude is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, sure. You have $100,000 just to hire a lawyer.
Exactly. And, one of the great cases, and in fact, I think one of the things that inspired me on this one was a movie. It's actually a movie called Flash of Genius, was done to highlight the story of the inventor of the intermittent wiper blade, Robert Kearns.
That's right.
And he invented the intermittent wiper blade, and he patented it. He had a patent in hand.
Ford, I remember that. Ford said, no, we're not interested in it. And then like a year later,
they used his design chapter and verse. I mean, there was not any, there wasn't even any effort to make it look like it wasn't theirs. So, and all the other car companies did as well.
Now I know the movie, yeah, that's right. That is, but yeah, he got nothing for it.
Actually he did. But it took I think 17 years till he finally won the first case. And I think he is still alive. I'm not sure, but he's definitely older at this point, and his family will benefit from I believe it's over $300 million that's been awarded.
Good for him.
So far.
Good for him. Let's move on here. And we were talking earlier about when we were kids and getting jobs, and when we were younger, there was a little problem, very little, in finding a job. Today we have an explosion. Unemployment of the youth it's in the 20 percentile range, even higher in some inner cities. We have an artificially inflated minimum wage law and the regulations, and that further restricts employment of the youth. And you mentioned in your book that we also have a population that is growing faster than there are jobs to supply them. And the college kids, and you and I spoke earlier about our different educational backgrounds, even college kids with degrees, they can't find a job. These kids have hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. The brainiacs that are coming out of college, they can't even find the simplest job. They can't find blue-collar jobs. And, in fact, there aren't even what I call gray-collar jobs. People sweeping floors, emptying trash, just basic building maintenance stuff, or sweeping sidewalks. All of that is all union tied up. You can't even find the simplest jobs. You have to know somebody who knows somebody else. You have to belong to a union. And application processes are all online now, and all of that just gets lost in the blogosphere and the webosphere. Without hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can't even get building permits to start a business. How does a person get their foot in the door today?
I'll tell you what, I wish I knew.
I wouldn't.
I shudder to think if I really had to find a job at this point. I'm very fortunate that I have, as you have, accumulated a variety of skills that allow me to make a living a number of different ways. And I think that the diversity of skill sets is going to be critical. You cannot, and it's almost a contradiction in terms, because when you go look for a job, the specific criteria that employers are looking for now, they literally list out, you must have this qualification, this qualification, this qualification, this experience, this experience, this experience. They basically weed it down to, one person in the known universe that has those qualifications.
Sure.
But at the same time, how do you get that? How do you get enough?
One person, right?
Yeah, and so for the employer, they eventually do find that, perfect fit, because they're in the driver's seat these days. I guess they can wait. But if you're an employee or a potential employee looking for that, how do you get that breadth of experience when you have to be so specialized?
And why are people like myself and other people who, I think of the military veterans who are coming home. I mean, these people can drive $100 million tanks. They can't get a job bagging groceries.
That, to me, is just criminal.
It's criminal, and also, when you go and apply online, and I've been unemployed, and I've gone through that process, and I mentioned about going online. When you go online, first of all, your application is just instantaneously going to get lost. Whoever the human resources person is, they are not looking at those applications, or they're not even looking at the resumes. The other thing, too, is you have these questionnaires. They're like psychological questionnaires. Oh, I feel I'm best at this. Strongly agree, somewhat agree. You understand what I'm saying? And they're designed so that if you answer a certain way, you fit into a certain mold. Personally, I think that's a little discriminatory. If you're going to hire an A-plus personality person, the second thing you've got to understand is they're not going to fit into their psychological mold.
Well, it's
an A-plus personality person is somebody who's going to always be thinking outside the box. Do I always get along with others? No, I don't, because I'm an A-plus personality.
Right,
but if you answer that way, it's like, oh, this guy's not going to fit in.
Exactly, and that's the. I think it's not just the trouble in our job market. It's the trouble in our country, is that if you don't practice the art of the perfect answer to all circumstances and questions, you are labeled a troublemaker or deviant in some way. But it's an extreme label, because you're not absolutely the perfect conformist.
I think about companies like Target, Walmart, other big box retailers. They've always got this culture mentality. And for a couple of years ago, I worked part-time for Target, and they always had that. We're here at Target, and we're that's fun and friendly, and we're going to, always the customer comes first. And I'd be thinking to myself, oh God, I'm going to play the yes, I'm excited to work this afternoon. And I was glad to have a job, and I liked working with customers, and I liked working, but again, it was this, well, you've got to have this constantly smiling mentality. Again, you've got to fit into this psychological mold.
And that I think is just one of the most disconcerting aspects of society today.
And I think it would be different for a company like yours, where you would look for somebody. I want somebody to kind of be a little out there, to come up with a new design, to maybe think of a new way so that my factory floor can run a little more efficiently, or maybe we can figure out a new way of distributing our products that's more efficient. I mean, I would want somebody who, I don't want to say doesn't get along with the other kids, but isn't afraid to say, hey, wait a minute.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. To me, that is beneficial, but when you live in this world where, on one hand, you're told it's all about you, from the everybody gets a trophy in, soccer to you're not graded, you're not rated, everybody's, everything is there for you. And we create this mindset that it's all about me.
Yes.
And so we have this huge portion of our population that has that mindset. It's all me.
But then they have to get into
But then they go to the job market, and then you tell them, no, you have to all be like this.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess maybe it's just because I get more gray hair, I don't quite understand it.
Like I said in the questionnaire, the population is growing faster than there are actual jobs. I think it was just since Obama, another 5 million manufacturing jobs, and just all sorts of jobs in general, and they're gone. They're out, and they've been outsourced, or they're just plain gone. And we have a population of college kids coming out. What kind of a recipe is this for our country? A very bad one.
Yeah, it's to me, it's disastrous.
You and I can go out this door right now and stop 10 people on the street, and I bet you 9 of them, well, I haven't got a job. I've been looking for the past year. Bet you we could right now.
I think the percentage would be pretty high.
Yeah.
But then ask them what they did. Well, I used to work at X mill. I used to work at Y mill. I used to work at this factory.
I spent 10 years working in sheet metal, building, designing. I was on the design team.
I was a machinist.
Even if somebody is like, I was a janitor, but I managed this store and I managed this building, and I branched out and these other companies, because I worked for this company, I became head janitor of all their companies and all their buildings, and I supervised 60 guys.
Yeah, and it drives me absolutely batty when I hear pundits on TV say, well, we now have a service economy. Okay.
Now, what does that mean, right?
But if think about that for a minute. Well, okay, if we have a service economy, then for us to have a service economy that is sustainable and to thrive economically, then all we can use as a populace is services.
And we have to be servicing something. What is it that we're servicing?
Food.
Well,
There's.
I was actually going to go back to my janitorial thing, but again, we have no industries, we have no big businesses anymore. So this poor janitor he can't get his 60 guys to take care of 5 or 6 buildings because those buildings and those jobs don't exist. Again,
it's
burgers.
It's crazy.
Go ahead.
Flipping burgers, consulting, engineering, accountants. I mean, there are lots of service businesses, but you cannot have a 100% service economy unless the needs of all of your population are 100% fulfilled by services.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so unless we get back to the days of you don't need a car because I'm going to put you on my back and I'm going to carry you wherever you need to go.
Okay.
And I'm going to build a fire out of wood with my hands to keep you warm. And that is kind of a pure. That's a pure service economy, but
being a coolie, right?
But think about what we spend our money on. Think about what you spend your money on. Think about what the average person on the street spends their money on. Take your average month and write down everything that you spend even a dime on: a candy bar, clothing, fuel, car payment, food,
like rent,
your house, the stuff you buy. Okay, and then categorize it. Is it something that had to be made by someone, a la manufactured, or was it something that was a service given you? You know, a pedicure for your wife.
I see what you're saying, right?
And
here's the thing, is that because of the joblessness, because of the tightening of the money supply, and I don't mean money supply from the Fed, I mean the money supply from you, me, the guy next door. We're not spending things on pedicures. We're not spending things on going out to the movies because quite literally we can't afford that anymore. We've done what the federal government refuses to do. We keep cutting back our budget to where we keep the roof over our head, we keep the lights on, we keep the food on the table, we keep the gasoline in the car. And what upsets me is that this is the sum total now of our existence. Just
but I think it's.
There was a time where you could go
there was a time when you could thrive.
Yeah.
Today we survive. It's a terrible thing. If you look at the trade deficit last year,
Go ahead.
total trade deficit, $471 billion.
Right.
Okay. Of that, $700 billion was imported goods, was more goods that we imported than exported. And we exported $231 billion in services, more than we took in. So yes, services is a big part of our economy, and it is a way our economy generates money. But it can never be an entire economy. And that's the thing. You can't just make these arbitrary statements, and a lot of the politicians and media will do that. They'll make arbitrary statements. We have a service economy. Well, quantify that. And that's what I love about trying to debate certain issues with certain people is quantify it.
And this brings me actually to my next point. Now NAFTA was supposed to open new markets. This whole free trade agreement was supposed to open up new markets. Now we have this supposedly a new Asian Pacific free trade agreement that's coming down the pipeline, TTP or something like that. I must admit I'm not very well versed. I know about it, I'm just not that well versed on it. But as we all know from history, that none of these things have happened as far as making our economy better. All it's done is outsource jobs overseas, down to Mexico, through NAFTA, overseas to China. America's industrial and economic power is just now an empty box, and it's stamped made in China. And you would mention in your book that not necessarily isolationism and not necessarily a trade war, but what is so wrong with just a little bit of isolationism, a little bit of maybe raising the tariffs just to balance, you mentioned some numbers there. If we just had a few tariffs, it seems like we don't have any at all right now. The ports are wide open.
Well, the funny thing is, when you were with me when we talked at the canal, and one of the Worcester Tea Party members wanted to debate me on.
I was there.
Wanted to debate me on pure free market and Friedman winning a Nobel Prize. Okay, Friedman was a brilliant man a long time ago, living in a different world.
Right, it was a different paradigm then.
Right, and on the
whole, big fan of Friedman.
Okay, on the whole, I believe in a free market. However, a true free market is not artificially inflated or affected.
Right.
Okay? That is a true free market. So we don't have a true free market on a global economy when the other participants in that global economy artificially inflate or deflate it.
Right.
How can you compete with what is virtually slave labor in China?
Yeah, and it's a press one, right? The money,
exactly,
dollar over there.
And
we complain about
and we can say, all right, sure, and we can have debates about labor practices and worker conditions and that, and sure. But we are not Chinese. We are not the Chinese people. We are not the Chinese government. And we cannot be responsible for what happens in that country. Those people will, if they wish to, they will take control of their own destiny at some point.
And I think one of his arguments, if I remember correctly, is that because of the free trade, it allows people to better utilize their money here in America by buying cheaper products that aren't necessarily made overseas. But again, in your book, one of the interesting, great things that you mention in there is it's all well and good to have cheaper products coming from overseas. But if you have an American company that is manufacturing here in the United States and employing American citizens, and they're paying good wages, good benefits, great, fine. But then, again, you mentioned in your book, what ends up happening is those employees get their paycheck on Friday and then go to Walmart and Target and buy everything made in China. They're essentially shooting themselves in the foot.
Sure, because sooner or later,
if
you can't afford to buy the products your own company makes, or if you refuse to buy the products your company makes because something cheaper is available. Let's say you are and I think a really good example would be, let's say you're the only company in America that makes TVs. And there isn't one, by the way.
Right.
There's one company that assembles them, and I don't even think they're still around. But let's say you're the only company that makes TVs in America, but your TVs cost $1,000. And you can buy a TV for the same features.
Right. Same TV everything.
Same, made in China for $400. Not one employee will buy that $1,000 TV.
Right. The employees who build the $1,000 TV are going to turn around and buy the $400 TV.
Exactly.
Right.
Because they're not educated. That was the whole reason I wrote this book. That was the whole reason I tried to write it is make it as easy a read as I could, so that people would read it, because they don't make the connection.
I got about halfway through the book, and I could not believe how much sense everything. And again, you don't write the book in such a way so that it just becomes a whole list of numbers and boring economic statistics. As I went along, everything that you were mentioning in the book made sense. Getting back to what you said about
just before you go there, it comes to mind. I wish I could draw, because I would draw a cartoon of a recently graduated college kid texting his friend on his iPhone, I don't know why I can't find a job.
On his iPhone, right? Made in China iPhone, exactly. Let's look at Occupy movement, how they screamed and yelled about corporate America while they drank Dunkin' Donuts and took pictures with their iPhones and slept in their Coleman tents. It seems like, and I mentioned this in a couple of interviews in the past, it seems like our entire country has entered what I call, and I wrote this in my blog, a whole series, Welcome to Bizarro World. A traveler's guide to Bizarro World. We've entered Bizarro World. Everything is upside down.
Or have you ever seen the movie Idiocracy?
Idiocracy. Exactly. We are fast heading that way.
And it's tragic. Because, and one of the jokes that I think I made in the book, but I've made on a few occasions, is that we should change our national bird to the ostrich.
Yeah, with the head to stand.
Yeah, because we just want to ignore reality. We don't want to learn. And I say I talk about the majority, the masses. They'll protest things that they don't understand. And I think a lot of it comes down to leadership. And unfortunately, politics today is about incite and divide, not unite and pride.
Sure. You're right. That divide. And then what happens when you divide, you're able to conquer. You're able to control the message. You're able to conquer the masses. Brings me to my next point. During the first wave of immigration at the turn of the 20th century, immigration was handled primarily by the Department of Labor. And it was specifically done that way to limit immigration and the impact of immigrants vis-a-vis the competition of American jobs. against American citizens. You didn't have an imbalance that was going on there. But today, the left is pushing for all-out amnesty. Again, we have double-digit unemployment, and I don't follow that 6.9% thing. When you take the black unemployment, when you take Hispanic, when you take teenagers, the number of Americans who just fell off the radar, we're looking at easily 25, possibly 30%. That's why I mean double digits. Those are the real numbers. But if we get this amnesty thing in, now look, 11 million more people competing in the job market, possible collapse of the entire...
I don't know if I would necessarily...
Yeah, give us your opinion on it.
Honestly, I don't think it's about whether we allow them to be legal while they're here or remain illegal while they're here. The reality is they're here.
Right.
Okay? That's the reality. And again, this is where I personally believe that if our country is ever to recover from the situation it's in economically and socially, it has to be based upon a goal of understanding, educating. And I don't mean educating in terms of educational. I mean about learning about the issue. Don't form an opinion. Don't follow opinion. Don't follow a puppeteer, if you will, or a politician.
Or a mantra, right.
Yeah, unless you understand it.
Sure.
Okay? To me, this is not about status. This is about work ethic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I'll tell you what. I will take a Mexican who will go 20 miles across the desert in the night, risking his life to pick strawberries for God knows what, $50 a day, $40 a day, and go back to undertake that kind of peril to feed his family. Okay? I'll take that person all day versus somebody who stands up and thinks that $12 an hour, $11 an hour
at 15-minute breaks
at McDonald's is
right.
demeaning.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you saw the same article. A bunch of protesters in the Chicago area protesting McDonald's, and I saw one woman say, "It's our money," talking about the wages, talking about going for, getting a higher paid wage. She's talking about the money she's paid for providing a service, for having a job, as hers. She presumes that money is hers from the get-go.
Right, it's the company's money, and they are paying you to perform.
It is not right. It is not your money until you have earned it.
That's right.
Okay? I'll take that poor Mexican citizen who's clamoring through the desert
To work for half that.
to feed his family.
Sure.
To over the person who is a third generation welfare family and who literally believes. You hear it. You see it on TV. You say, I deserve. You hear teenage girls, and this to me is heartbreaking. I don't know if it's a loss of hope, if it's apathy, if it's social poisoning that they undergo, that they say, I cannot wait until I'm 16 so I can get pregnant and get my own welfare check.
Yeah, sure. Hey, you do hear. My daughter is in her teen years. She's not like that, but there's a couple of her friends. She doesn't hang around with them anymore. I mean, I'm sure of that, but that is the attitude of her. And I find that I think it's prevalent more in the cities than it is probably more in the suburbs or in more rural areas of the country. I grew up out in Northborough, the Southborough area, back in the days when it was still relatively rural. It was a completely different mindset out there, and I came to live in Worcester the past couple of years for economic reasons. It is cheaper, but it was an incredible culture clash for me in that
it's a mind shift.
It's what it is. No, it really is. It really is, because I run into people, I listen to people, and that's just my nature. Again, because of what I do here with the radio show, is that I like to listen to conversations and listen to people. And it is. there's a degrading in the educational level, there's a degrading in the elocution, just listening to somebody speak. There is that mentality of I deserve, gimme, what's in it for me.
Well, what did you think? Well, I breathed. Therefore, I'm entitled.
Exactly. And it is. It's been a culture shock for me because I didn't come from that. I told her I was a high school dropout, and my mother said, well, if this is going to be your life, then you've got to... She literally booted me in the butt and said, go out there and get a job and start doing something. And that's what I did. You know, like today, I see these young kids. I don't see that.
Well, I went. It was really interesting. I went over to see a good friend of mine, actually just after the snowstorm finished the other day. And she's a single mother, works like a fiend, late 30s, and she grew up in a very similar kind of has strong work ethic and determined family. And her kids are really, they're teenagers, and they're really nice kids. I mean, I think, if anything, you know, these are the kind of kids that are our hope, and they work very hard in school. But at the same time, I think when I look at them, I consider them hardworking because I'm comparing them to their peers.
Sure.
When I was a kid, and you know, it's funny, you know, you get to that point in life, you go, oh my God, I became my parents.
I know.
But literally, and you heard me tell the story in Worcester, snow day to me was great, not because I could be on the iPad.
Went out there, snow, and you made money.
Right. I mean, but it was...
You can't get a kid to do that.
It was hilarious because, and I remember them so fondly.
I loved it.
I mean, literally, my mother would be taping the snow pants around the boots, the gloves on the things, so that, you know, try and keep some of the water out.
You were going to be out there all day.
Yeah, she would, you know, she'd make me a couple of tuna fish sandwiches. They would be folded up in baggies and stuffed into pockets until there was some kind of substance by the time they got eaten. And she would have me by the back of the neck, you know, at 7:58, 7:59, to make sure that I did not leave that house until it was 8 a.m. because if I dared knock on one of the neighbors' doors before 8 a.m., you know, I would be killed.
Yeah, you'd be waking somebody up, right?
You know, and the same thing, I better be back at 8 at night because I shouldn't be banging on the neighbors' doors. Again, the respect was just as important as the work ethic. And you make sure you thank every one of these people, you know, and I got my marching orders.
Sure.
But I did not. But I would leave, and that would be 12 hours, and I didn't stop to eat my lunch. I'd eat it between doors.
The other thing, too, is, as I said...
And to me, I go back there with pride.
Of course. I did, you know, my first job, I think I was 11 or 12 years old. There was a guy down the street. He had a horse, and he would go away on vacation away. He always needed somebody to take care of the horse. And eventually, one summer, he said, well, I'm going to buy another horse, and I need to put on an addition onto the barn. And he said, are you looking for a job? I said, sure. And next thing I know, I'm helping him build the barn. So I learned two skills. One, how to take care of a horse, which is no small thing. Try to find somebody today who knows how to actually care for a horse. And then two, I learned how to build. I learned carpentry, which eventually translated years later into I started my own contracting business. And it wasn't just this one person that taught me the skills, but it was part of that. It was part of that idea and that mentality that I just went out there and somebody was able to give me a job doing that. One of the problems I think we see today is regulations. My daughter, I just mentioned her a few minutes ago, she's like, Dad, I want to get a job. It's like, honey, you can't. You're only 14. And I think to myself, Jesus Christ, when I was 12, I was working. When I was 13, I was washing dishes at a restaurant, for crying out loud. Under the table, behind the scene. You can't anymore.
Well, and even if you think about it from another perspective, you know, I remember being, oh my God, I must have been 8 or 9. My father's changing the oil in the car. Literally, I say, what you doing, Dad? So I'm changing the oil. Get under here.
Get under here, loosen that bolt. I know. Yeah, I did it. My dad too. Exactly.
You know, and
And I taught my kids all that stuff too. Unfortunately,
my sisters were taught that stuff.
yeah, and unfortunately, see, you and I would think, well, we're teaching them a valuable lesson, we're teaching them a skill.
DYS would have our parents locked up, not even for what they asked us to do, what they allowed us to do. If today a kid said, if a DYS or DFS or whatever the agency is.
My dad let me use a skill saw. What?
Yeah. Or my dad what'd you do on your snow day? I shoveled snow for 12 hours. Well, did your father make you do that?
Technically, yeah.
No, in my case, it was,
Yeah,
my money. I didn't have
I wanted to go. Yeah, me too. But yeah, they would be. Well, where was your father? What do you mean you were roaming around the neighborhood by yourself? What do you mean you only had one pair of boots? I know. Yeah, you're right. Again, getting back to the regulations, getting back to the laws and the rules, it's like this top-down, it's actually contributing to the problem.
It absolutely is the problem, because it feeds the entitlement mentality. It feeds you don't have to do it. There's no duty. There's no responsibility.
We'll take care of you. Let's move on here. We're getting up there. Another point, again, in your book that you make, is about the war industry and the military-industrial complex. It does technically prop up our economy, and it's one of the things you mentioned in your book about how because of the war on terror and the trillions of dollars that are being spent on basically war machinery, even uniforms and logistics and everything else, it's helped keep our economy from completely going off the cliff. What does this mean when and if this war comes to an end? And it made me, as I'm writing this, I thought to myself, maybe this is why other countries do this. What about America getting involved in proxy wars just to keep that industry going? Like Iran, they have proxy wars. Even the Soviet Union, the Russia today, they still proxy wars. They still feed guns and weapons, and it feeds part of their economy. What's the possibility of the United States doing the same exact thing vis-a-vis Syria, maybe some African countries that we're selling arms to?
Well, but at the same time, then don't we put ourselves in a position for some other nation or some other population to hate us?
Exactly.
Don't we perpetuate the view of us within the world?
Exactly, but couldn't that be one of the ways we keep that industry alive? Once the war on terror,
But I think that will happen anyway.
Yeah, sure. And in fact, if you look at American history, because the left is always pointing this out about how we're involved in Central America, the proxy wars in there. And of course, we have the 60s, the whole involvement with Cuba. There was a whole involvement in Angola, the Congo, Vietnam, Cambodia. I mean, I'm not going to give a huge litany, a history lesson here, but you know exactly what I'm saying. The American, but look at the French in Algeria.
But in those cases, you're talking about small arms.
Right.
We can't prop up our economy unless we can send cruise missiles, and destroyers, and billion dollar bombers. And I say it kind of tongue in cheek. But the bottom line is, we need an economy that is sustainable in serving our needs as a populace. Okay? Even if you look at certain basics, building our infrastructure. And Diane Sawyer did a piece on 2020, it was maybe 5 to 8 years ago, but you can still find it pretty easily. Just do Diane Sawyer, Chinese bridge construction in California. And there was some crazy number, like $50 billion of highway construction in California that was awarded to Chinese contractors.
Oh my God.
Okay? And, getting back to what you were saying about protectionism. All right, well, Obamacare, we contracted that website to a Canadian company. Okay, yet we don't have the skills to build websites in this country.
Can you go to Google or
Google and Amazon's websites never work. I mean, why would you give it to them?
I know Google, it just doesn't work exactly. Yeah, why? Well, from what I've researched on that is that there was, campaign contributions is what it was, and I think somebody in the company was either a friend of Michelle. There was somebody who was a friend of Michelle whose husband or somebody owned the company. I could be completely off, but again, it gets me back to what I said. It's somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. And campaign contributions.
Right, and these are the kind of things that cannot happen. If we are about taking care of our people, okay, then you know what? Taking care of our people, all right? And when I think of a political movement, all right, whether it's libertarianism, whether it's the Tea Party, whether it's the ultra-right, call it whatever you want, okay? They are either constructive or destructive. They are either uniting or they are dividing. Okay, and I think one of the things that has to happen if our country is ever going to get under solid footing, if our economy is ever going to get under solid footing, is we need to make it about the country, about all of us as wholes, not one of us as a member of the whole. And when you look at something like that, it is paramount that we look at the greater good, that we forget these individual entitlements, the cronyism, the corruption. See, this is where government should be a servant of the people, a protector of the people, a protector of the people's interests, not a crony clubhouse.
Sure, which is.
Okay, because if politicians aren't servants of the people, they're politicians. You know, they aren't leaders. A leader cares nothing for himself, a true leader. A true leader gets up there and says, we have an opportunity. Personally, I think Obamacare is the worst disaster, or one of the worst disasters to befall our country in ages. But at least make it about the people. Listen to the people. Give the jobs to American companies.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
There's a book called Stealing Elections by John Fun, Swift Voting by the author. He's one of the Fox News newscasters there. I forget his name. And that practically every law, every act of legislation over the last 10, I'm going to say 15 years, has a huge level of insider trading. The laws aren't passed necessarily to improve something or to clean something up or to do away with some sort of corruption. It's all a deal. Everything is a deal now. The politicians take money from the lobbyists who are in league with companies, and they pass a law that benefits those companies, benefits those politicians. The cycle keeps continuing. So you have this, we call it crony capitalism, but it's like a gerbil wheel of money coming in, money going out, laws getting passed, companies benefiting from it. And like you said, the people, the average American, they're not getting anything as a result of this.
Well, look at what happens in an election. You know, it's almost comical when you watch the wave when the last senatorial election. You know, you watch the wave of results coming in from the western part of the state to the eastern part of the state because they have less to count. And it's, you know, Brown. What, he lost? As soon as you get to Cambridge.
Sure.
And it's all the political process is completely corrupted.
And it's gamed. Here in Massachusetts, well, you know, nobody in the state house votes until DeLeo votes. We all know that. Whichever way he votes, that's how everyone votes.
Yeah. But look at even the PACs. You and I, as a citizen, can put out $2,700 per candidate at any given time. You know, we cannot put out any more money. Even if we had more money than God, we can't do that because it would be seen as pursuing undue influence. Yeah, we could write $1 billion check if we wanted to a PAC.
Yeah, exactly. Is there any hope? Is there any hope for this? You and I remember the 70s. I remember all that. I remember Jimmy Carter's Malaise speech. 20% interest rates, all that stuff. I know I was younger back then, but I've always been involved with politics. My family always was. I didn't have that hopelessness. I remember when Reagan first took over and things actually got worse before they got better. I didn't have that hopelessness. I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. And in fact, it was during the 80s that I started my contracting business. Even when George Bush Sr. at the end of the Gulf War and we had that recession, I knew it was just temporary. It was a bump in the road, and naturally things got better. I don't have that. I can't see that light at the end of the tunnel right now. I can't see it.
Yeah. You know, I see it once in a while, but I usually think it's a train coming the other way.
Yeah. Seriously, you feel that way too? You're in business. You must look at the numbers. You must talk to people. You must know.
I know it's harder and harder and harder. And there was a time when, you know, I looked to levels of financial success, you know, based on total dollars. And I find myself personally saying, I don't want to make a lot of money because it's just going to be taken from me. I want to make what I need to live, to enjoy some amount of life, but I don't expect to ever have an opportunity to be wealthy. And I always did. So I think that especially this administration and the mindset that has fomented under them has put us in a position where we have lost immeasurable skill. We have downsized, right-sized, outsized, huge amounts of talent that are necessary to build an economy, particularly a manufacturing economy. We have taken the work ethic from generations of Americans that if we had a factory, wouldn't work it. So, and unless we can produce as a country, how can we have prosperity? And it's heartbreaking to me.
It's heartbreaking to me. Unbelievable. James, the book is Exporting Prosperity, Why the U.S. Economy May Never Recover. James Boudreau, thanks so much for coming on. Come back.
Anytime. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Want to give a website, information, maybe information on your company?
Sure. You can basically find anything you want on exportingprosperity.com. And, you can look us up on Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media. Pretty easy to find.
I'll post up links as I edit the video. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Enjoy your day. Very good.